Welcome to Reach, your platform to connect with other executive assistants and acquire game-changing knowledge and perspective. Reach is designed to inspire your workday, guide you through pivotal moments in your career, and transform you into the executive assistant you've always wanted to be. Hello, Reach listeners, and welcome to another episode. This is your host, Jessica Van. I'm the founder and CEO of Maven Recruiting Group. And joining me today are Varsha Rao and Sheena Deol. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. Really excited for our conversation. I have dreamed of bringing this episode to our listeners for literally years. It's been an absolute pleasure over the 5 or so years that we've been doing this to have these incredible executive assistant voices join our program, but we've never actually had the opportunity until today to hear a firsthand account of the inner workings of the executive and executive assistant relationship, which is what Varsha and Sheena will be discussing with us today. Varsha is the former CEO of Nurx, a company that she and Sheena worked at together for 3.5 years. Varsha is currently the founder and CEO of a company called Zeal AI. Zeal AI, for those who don't know, is a bespoke, highly curated, concierge-like service that leverages AI to help with restaurant bookings and social gatherings and basically all the things that make executive assistants worlds so much easier. For those that would like to check that out, it's www.hellozeal.ai. And Sheena has since gone on from Nurx to support the CEO of a company called Adam. So we'll be talking a little bit more today about the nature of their partnership, how it was that they worked together in a really effective and admirable way. We're also going to have the opportunity to learn more and dive deeper into Varsha's latest endeavor, which I mentioned is Zeal.ai. And she also has an incredible special offer for our executive assistant listeners. So make sure to stay tuned until the very end so you can hear details on what that offer is and find out how to access it. But we will also be linking that information in the show notes for this episode. So without any further ado, Varsha, how would you describe game-changing support, and what are your expectations when it comes to how you like to partner with an assistant?
So first of all, thank you for having myself here. And I want to thank you, Sheena, for doing this because I'm super excited to be able to do this together with you. To me, there's 3 qualities that make game-changing support. And I'm going to start with probably the least intuitive one. I think for me, one of the most important aspects is somebody who is fun to work with. And I'm going to start with that because, business can be stressful, work can be tiring. And at the end of the day, for me, it's been super helpful and powerful to have somebody who just has a great sense of presence and calmness and is fun to work with because that can help just smooth everything over, all the ups and downs that happen in everyone's day-to-day. And Sheena has been an incredible example of that. In addition to that, I would say there's 2 qualities to me that are critical. One is ownership, and then the second is empathy. And those are some of the things that I appreciated the most about Sheena. I think ownership is incredibly important. Whenever there was something to be done, I barely had to kind of mention what it was, and Sheena would take it and just, own it till the end. And, just such a high degree of quality that it was really, I had confidence from the minute I kind of asked her to do something that it would get done. And then the second is empathy. And I think to me, when I say empathy, I'm thinking about the challenges that I might be facing, or the executive team might be facing, or just the team at large, because I think so much of empathy is so important as we are building culture, as we are navigating different challenges. And that sense of, hey, we're in it together and we are going to try to make this as successful as possible is sort of the softer side of ownership that I would
Mm-hmm.
say. And I think it's what makes a great relationship. And it's those are the kinds of things I appreciate the most in Sheena.
How did Sheena display empathy?
I think she just got it. I will give you the first example. I think one of my first days of work. I was not the founder of Nurx. I was an early angel investor, and I was invited in to be the CEO. And so I had kind of a transition experience that it had its own challenges because we had a great founder, a great founding team, and I was, asked to come in by the founders to kind of help to scale the business. And and I just remember one of the first day, or maybe it was after the first couple hours, Sheena just literally came to me with a cup of coffee and
Mm.
was like, "Hey, you've already had 12 meetings. Take a break and just, relax. And I'm gonna like move your next meeting by 15 minutes so that you have some time to like regroup." And I just felt like that was, I had somebody who was actually kind of looking out for me in the best interest of so I could be the best I needed to be for the company.
Yeah, I love that example. I think that's truly how you know you're feeling, or that somebody is looking out for you and feeling protected and safeguarded and all of the things that are so important in preservation, self-preservation. Yeah. Okay, what about you, Sheena? When you think about the intangibles or the qualities of what makes someone a great executive and a great executive partner, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And before I answer, thank you, Varsha. I don't even remember the coffee example, so I appreciate that you did. Going back to the question, I've supported multiple CEOs, and I think the most impactful partnerships have had one major thing in common, which is when the executive brings a strong sense of self-awareness. I think that's a very underrated quality. A self-aware leader knows how they work best, what drains them, what motivates them, where they need support, and just as importantly, where they need to step back and trust. And so I think that kind of clarity really sets the foundation for everything. It's communication, decision making, and just how we kind of handle curveballs together. Um, I'd say another key quality is transparency. That's a big one. Um, when an executive is just open about what's happening behind the scenes, the good, the bad, the ugly, it creates space for an EA to be proactive and instead of reactive, just having all of that information and knowing the why behind a decision or shift in direction helps me just problem solve faster and keep things aligned. The more I know, the better I can operate. And then the third one I'm going to steal from Varsha, but I do think empathy is a big one. I think great executives lead with heart, and that's something I always saw in Varsha, especially when you led the all hands. That's one thing I remember. I think that it brings an understanding that EAs are more than just gatekeepers, right? And we're more of a partner to you. And so, yeah, just build trust. And I think that creates more efficiency and more impact as an EA.
What do you think is important as you're coming together, right? This unit that's forming, especially in the early days of a relationship. And I think you gave such a poignant, lovely example, Varsha, of the way that Sheena identified and put herself in your position very early on. I think it was day one, right? That
Yeah.
she saw that you were probably a little beleaguered and worn out and brought you that cup of coffee. But what are some of the things that are so critical and important to do in those early kind of normalizing days to really set yourselves up for a successful partnership?
And I think it sort of goes to Sheena's point about self-awareness and willingness to open up. And then I think on the flip side of that, it's, somebody who's willing to accept that the person they're working with has maybe some priorities or some is not perfect. Like, so for me, I know that I think I told you, Sheena, pretty early on that I tend to run late in meetings, and so that's an area where I would need some help. And so Sheena was really great about trying to help me keep on track. I'm a little bit of I work late at night, and so I'm a little bit later in the morning. And so that probably like the 9 o'clock meeting is going to be like I'll be rushing to get in for that meeting. And so she was also always great about like helping me have some buffers, and understanding that like for me working out was a non-negotiable. I really needed that for kind of my stress management and just overall health. And she understood that and tried to like work that into my calendar without that I any feeling of like any judgment, I guess is what I would say. Like I think she recognized that those things were important to me, and it was okay for me to have some things that were important that I could express to her. And so I really appreciated that. It was what made it easier for me, right from the beginning, to build trust and a good relationship with Sheena.
Would you agree with those, or would you add anything differently?
Yes, I would definitely agree with those points. And maybe the only thing to add is just knowing the priorities for the week, the month, the quarter, whatever it might be, which I think we were really good at. We did our daily stand-ups in the mornings, and then we just had a constant communication. So I was always aware of priorities, and that just as an EA helps me kind of know which direction to go into, or otherwise I'm kind of going everywhere. But I think that just communication, cadence, and style, understanding everything about Varsha or an executive up front helps me to just be able to be more efficient and not have to follow up with questions.
Right. And I think it's wonderful. I mean, in this case, obviously we're talking about the two of you and your particular style and approach. And it does sound like on the spectrum of unaware in the dark ages to enlightened and self-aware, that Varsha, you're on the enlightened side, right?
I don't know, but there's always room for improvement.
There's always room for improvement, but it does sound like you're cognizant of A, of all what's important to you, B, of all where you're fallible and where you tend to kind of push the limits or need somebody to help pull you in, or be aware of whatever, the timing, things like that. I think that's amazing. And to your point, Sheena, it really is like a lot of it is really being a really astute observer, especially in the early days, and really understanding the person that you're supporting. What are their rhythms? What are their, challenges? What are their fallibilities? What are their triggers? All these types of things. What kind of cadence they like to keep? All of this stuff is really important. But not everybody is always, I think, as forthcoming or as keenly sharp and aware of how they operate. As for instance, like Varsha, you seem like you're pretty attuned to what you like and what makes sense for you. Do you have any thoughts, Sheena, like when somebody is maybe not as aware and maybe isn't as forthcoming about that? I mean, what do you recommend if somebody isn't as, transparent about that?
I think I'm a pretty self-aware person, so I'm able to catch these things. But first thing is to develop the trust with this executive, because somewhere down the line, I'd like to have the opportunity to share feedback. And then when I share the feedback, it's in a way that I know, the communication style, just the words I use, the timing of it. I'm very strategic about that to make sure when I do share that feedback, it's going to make an impact and reach the executive. And also, I always try to tie in any feedback to the business if it's affecting the business. So I think it's an art. There's a way to do it versus just telling someone, hey, you're not aware of this.
And there's a way, as you use the word artistry, I agree. I mean, there's a way that you can give that feedback. It's like there's a difference between you're always late to your meetings versus I've noticed that it might be beneficial to have a little bit more of a buffer, because it seems like whenever you get together with Paul, the two of you tend to go over or whatever,
Yeah, I've noticed a pattern. Yeah.
Yes. Noticed a pattern. That's a nice tee up. Are there other things apart from, being a good study of you, Varsha, and we talked about just that Sheena really was a good study of you, right? She was dialed into you. She was present. She was paying attention to you, and what your needs were. But are there other kind of specific examples that come to mind when you reflect on those 3.5 years together that really made you feel taken care of and seen, and also that really felt to you like you were getting the kind of true value and leverage that this relationship aspires to be?
First of all, I think from the very beginning, she really welcomed me in as this incoming CEO, especially because she had worked with the founders, and one of our founders stayed on, but one actually decided to move on, and so it was a sensitive situation, um, and it wasn't necessarily easy for her, but it also wasn't easy for me. And so I think, I think she was just very open-minded, and I think that really set the stage for a great relationship, and also signaled to, she's a culture bearer, and a lot of people looked to Sheena because she'd been there and I was new. They looked at how she was handling the situation, and I think it was a signal to others that, like, okay, they seem to be getting along well, and Sheena seems to be super supportive, so I'm gonna trust that. And so that actually really made my journey a lot easier. And I would say that, that's one of the things that maybe executive assistants don't realize, how much impact that they have on other people in the organization and perceptions. And I think they really do have a lot of impact. So Sheena also really helped me navigate the organization because, again, I would say Sheena in particular, but also a lot of executive assistants, they really know everybody in the organization. It's like kind of part of the job. And so she helped me understand who I needed to see right from the beginning, who, might need some extra time. Sometimes people would obviously come to her if they really wanted to spend time with me and they didn't know me as well in the beginning. And so, she made all of those meetings happen. And that, really goes to relationship building. So, and that's so important in terms of being successful. Yes, the meeting setup is kind of the logistical part, but the navigation is kind of the strategic part. So I think those are two things that, I think I found super helpful. And then I mentioned earlier that, Sheena just had incredible ownership. So pretty early on, we had a offsite for all the new execs because it was part of kind of a get to know you better. She literally handled all the logistics, but not just that, she went above and beyond to have, a nice environment so that we could actually all get to really have some quality time together. And, we'd have some good food, and we'll have some, beverages to kind of break the ice a little bit. And so she really thought about all of those things. And, and some of those details were not top of mind for me because I was still brand new and navigating. But she just handled all of it and was really thoughtful.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that word, this idea of navigation and helping, basically being a compass to the executive, especially in your case, coming into an organization and having to quickly get your footing and get your bearings. What are the things that you think are important, Sheena, in equipping an executive? Or what were the things that you knew instinctually Varsha would need to know?
I think it was giving her a little bit of background on the people that she was meeting with. And Varsha actually reminded me of this. Just, pointing out to her maybe if this executive is a little bit more sensitive to XYZ, and just giving her that background. I think that I had, that was something that I had that was valuable to Varsha being new.
And what about, same question, but for you, Sheena. So, what are some things that Varsha did early on that allowed you to really do your job to the best of your ability?
So Varsha scheduled actually a one-on-one with me, and that was not to align on calendar, not, not any of that. It was more to just hear from me what I needed and where I'm at. And I thought that was very cool. I mean, that's not something that it's usually reversed. The roles are usually switched. And so I wasn't expecting it either. And, I think the transition happened so quickly. There were so many moving parts. And so I didn't really have a second to sit down and breathe. And so I remember being nervous when she scheduled the one-on-one. But it was to hear where I'm at, how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, like what are my career goals. And it was kind of going back to the word empathy, like I found that very empathetic, and it allowed me to trust her and like just feel comfortable and like be able to do my job better.
Yeah, that's really nice. It's like lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't usually get that.
No, you don't.
Coming in with a list of
You really
questions.
don't.
Executive.
No, I know. You would like to think that you do, but that displays a level of thoughtfulness and care and regard that I don't think oftentimes is present. So more often than not, we hear executive assistants saying, "How can I convey, what my growth goals are? How can I convey what's important to me? Or I'd like to have the opportunity to, advocate for myself." So it's not usually teed up in a nice way like that. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
to add on, it was, when a new executive comes in, it's like, well, what's my role? Like, you have all these kind of questions that pop up in your head. But
Sure.
yeah, she came in and trusted me. She gave me, like she mentioned, the full ownership. And for an EA to thrive, I think you need that from your executive. Just you trusting that I'm going to make the right decisions and just, give me that autonomy. So yeah,
Yeah.
she did that.
So what were some of the practices that the two of you adopted? You did mention already, Sheena, I think you said they were daily stand-up meetings? Daily or weekly, was it?
Daily.
We did
Daily.
daily.
Okay, yeah. So that's one clear and distinct practice that I think is a great one. That can be hard, again, for executive assistants to secure that time on the calendar. I often hear that of how do I get my executive to prioritize the time and create space for me? And the fact that you guys were doing that on a daily basis says a lot. So that's one great practice. But I'm curious if there were other practices that the two of you adopted that you found to be the most beneficial or the most impactful in terms of streamlining communications, being able to stay on task with projects, things like that.
So just to clarify, I do agree that sometimes it can be hard to do the daily sync. So sometimes we would do it when I was driving in to work. And so but it just felt like if we got even like 5 minutes chatting in the morning, it would started the day off in a different way. And, I could convey a few things that maybe I hadn't had chance to like Slack or email about. And Sheena could tell me about a couple things that were like urgent that I hadn't I needed to follow up on. So I think we tried to do that pretty much every day. And I really found that and even when I was traveling. And so that was actually really, I found that really helpful. And then I think, we tried to do pretty good job with, well, we also had a running doc, didn't we? I remember us having like a running Google Doc. And so, that's where we could kind of keep notes on things that, maybe needed to get done by one person or another. And, it could be a little bit asynchronous because, sometimes if we hadn't had a chance to talk in the middle of the day, but something got done, Sheena could note it, or she could put a comment in there like, "Hey, I need you to do this." And so that would be, I thought that was kind of, very helpful. And then we had our special projects, right? OKRs and investor meetings. And I remember we always used to set up time to plan for those. And sometimes those involved other people as well, because it wasn't, it was maybe our CFO was involved, and Sheena had a great relationship with Ori as well. And so, or, for investor meetings, for example, or, Sheena was the lead on our all hands. meeting. And so sometimes that also involved our head of HR and our founder, actually, one of the founders. So those meetings were kind of with involved other people, but we usually tried to have enough time to plan for those, I would say. And once we had the outline, then I thought we did a pretty good job of kind of
Yeah.
then going with it. What do you think, Sheena?
I agree. Yeah. I think just having that consistent communication and planning, I think it also helped that we were in an office and we sat right next to each other. So
Yeah.
where I could kind of just grab her real quickly while she was walking to her next meeting.
It's funny. I think we're on this theme of navigation. I'm hearing a lot of navigation references. So we had the navigation reference early on, and now I'm hearing this whole idea of kind of like syncing in the beginning part of the day. It's like kind of like charting a course for the day, right? And I think that's really, really beneficial if you can get that time, because it sets the tone, but it also sets the action plan for what the two of you are going to accomplish during the course of the day. And to your point, Varsha, a lot can change overnight. You know, things can continue to evolve after 6 p.m., right? And a lot of things can shift. I'm curious though, like for those EAs who are listening today and are thinking, well, this is lovely. You know, they were on the same page from the first moment they met. And isn't that great? And it is. But for those that maybe are struggling to get their executive to understand why they need that time, why it's important to give them even just that 5 minutes on their morning commute, right? How, as an executive, Varsha, how would you suggest an EA approach you if you weren't open to that, if you were sort of closed off? What would be the most effective way to approach you to get you to understand why you should give them that time?
Yeah, I think I might actually just, whatever your communication method is, let's say it's like Slack or Teams, or almost every company has something at this point. Um, I would actually send a message to your executive and say, sort of like, hey, are there any things that I can, that are high priority for you this morning that I need to take care of? So that, let me know, because I want to make sure that I can get those taken care of or something. And I think that's like a proactive way. And, hopefully the executive at least says, no, I'm all good, or thanks for asking, or, all set, or like, an emoji that, or something. But even if they don't, I would say that like it's an entree, and the executive will appreciate it that you have made that, ask that question, because then, maybe once in 4 days they'll respond back and say, hey, actually today I do need this. And I think that's what I would have, I would have liked if someone like Sheena hadn't, been proactive and we hadn't had this channel. I think that would be really helpful and valuable. And I would do it in the communication channel that's your work environment versus like a, iMessage or a chat, like phone chat, because I just think it keeps everything streamlined.
Yeah. So, what about a tough conversation or learning moment that the two of you went through together that ultimately made the partnership stronger?
I think I can answer that. I don't think necessarily it was a tough moment or, well, tough conversation, but it was the CEO transition. I know we talked about that, but that was probably the toughest moment. On my end, I think it was actually around this exact date, and it was on my birthday or like the day after. And, it was like, this is the update. We need to have an all hands. And like, it was like, here's the actions that are on you. And it was like, just go, go, go. And so, yeah, I think us kind of both having, all the traits that we mentioned earlier really helped to focus on what needed to be done and get, this transition as smoothly communicated, make sure all the other employees are okay. I remember even scheduling meetings with like managers, one-on-ones for the teams, just, to ensure like if there are questions, they're answered. And so, yeah, I think we just knew what to do and we both handled it really well. But that was probably the toughest situation.
Yeah, I think coming out of that, feeling like, having getting through the first week was just a lot, and getting through that successfully together, I feel like we built this, like, oh my gosh, we did it, and that kind of helped to build this foundation that then everything else was built on. And and I'd say in our situation, it was this transition, but I think there can be other situations that are, you know maybe a company is going through a bad earnings period, or there's a layoff, or something like that. And I think those situations can be very challenging, but going through them together, I think, makes the relationship stronger.
Yeah, definitely. I would absolutely agree with that. In fact, we had the last episode that we just released last week of the podcast is with a woman named Eliza Leone, who is with Decker Communications, and they specialize in communication strategy and narrative storytelling, in a corporate setting, and how to do that effectively, and how to also not forget about the importance of context and making sure that people are bought in. And I mean, as you mentioned, Sheena, making sure that certain people had time and there was time for transition conversations, and just really taking the temperature effectively of the organization is so critical. But sounds like you guys navigated that extremely well. And it really kind of
Well,
foreshadowed, well, yeah, it really kind of set the tone and foreshadowed the positive relationship that you guys created afterward. So having had this firsthand experience, Varsha, right, of working with Sheena and seeing, what an EA goes through, what an EA thinks about, what are the considerations. I mean, you mentioned a little bit ago in our conversation about how Sheena would create these really thoughtful meetings, and part of that was content driven, right? But part of that was also context driven, and making sure that they were set up in the right environment, and the right food was there, and the right vibe was present, and all of these things, right? So there's so much to consider in terms of what an executive assistant does and how they really bring these successful experiences to fruition. So I'm curious, in working with Sheena and observing her and how she operates, did that shape your perspective at all on the kinds of tools or the kinds of resources that are beneficial to executive assistants, and that they use on a regular basis? And I'm also curious, I guess, kind of second part to that question is, did that in any way kind of inform your vision or impact your vision behind creating Zeal AI?
absolutely. So, I think so much of what Sheena did for us at our last company together, and what I've seen from speaking to other EAs and other, that I know and also have gotten to know, is that they are really helping build culture, build team bonding, collaboration, through bringing people together. And it's often over meals because there's something about food that I think, just it just, food, and it just lightens everybody up. It kind of, it's an important part of the whole kind of experience of building a relationship. And what I found is that it's just a lot of work for folks, because there's the where to go element of finding a place that is not necessarily that easy, because sometimes you're trying to find a place at a restaurant that accommodates a large group. You want a private room. Some of these spaces are not on your traditional booking platforms. But even if it's a smaller, lunch or dinner, finding a place with a quiet ambiance, so you can actually hear each other when you talk, is critical for, investor meetings and other, client meetings and things like that. And so I just felt like there had to be that's the one part, is kind of finding the place. And then the second is actually finding the place that has availability, that also can accommodate your dietary preferences or some of your location needs. And So there's not really any tools that help you with all of this. And it becomes even harder if someone like Sheena or an EA or anyone really is planning in a location that they're less familiar with. A lot of executives are traveling, and a lot of times these team meetings or client meetings are happening in a different location than where the headquarters are or where their office is. And so Zeal AI is, the mission is really to help create memorable experiences by bringing people together over meals. And the product itself, which is at hellozeal.ai, our website, uses AI and ChatGPT, that kind of interface, to make finding restaurants that are actually tailored and personalized to what your unique need might be. So it's whether it's a offsite or a business client dinner or a investor meeting or a board meeting, any of those types of situations, using AI to find great options for you, and then marrying that up with actual availability across all the different platforms. So, there's a number of different platforms that are out there today, and instead of people having to go to all the different platforms one by one, we try to bring it all together for you. And then where we're going and what we've added is, reviews and testimonials from EAs themselves who have actually booked these restaurants for business purposes. So, and I think that's really important, and EAs have mentioned that that's really important, because a Yelp review for a personal dinner just doesn't have the same, it
Right.
doesn't work
Yeah.
for if relative to like an important investor meeting or a client meeting. So our goal is to bring all of that together, and that's what the hellozeal.ai product for EAs does.
Yeah. Which I love. I mean, it's taking what is traditionally a very manual process, right? And really having to kind of go through this very manual checklist of what is suitable, what has the right components for this particular event, accessibility, I mean, all of the things, and making it just this really elegant, streamlined, very immediate result, which is just fantastic, right? So we mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, but there is. I love that you've created an opportunity for our listeners to be able to trial this, specifically through this offer that you're going to share with us at the end of the program, because I think it's just so exciting to be at the cutting edge, of all, of what's important in the executive assistant community, and really, bringing relevant tools that really help enrich executive assistants' functionality, but really their experience, right? And their ability
Absolutely.
to impact and do meaningful things and offer meaningful contributions. And by the way, if we can save executive assistants oodles of time, then they have, yeah, exactly, applause from Sheena, then they have that much more opportunity to do other things, So it's a really elegant, beautiful solution. So really excited for our listeners to be able to trial that. Sheena, you're an active Zeal AI user. So tell us about, how you've incorporated it into your workflow and how you're using it.
Yeah, kind of just touching on what you were saying. I've been using it more often now, and it's kind of my go-to. I use it as my assistant, essentially. It's kind of like ChatGPT, right? I'll type into the chat box and include all of the details that would maybe normally take me like 30 to 40 minutes, right? Just kind of cross-referencing or cross-checking different platforms, and I type that all of that into ChatGPT, and it's things like the location, right? Parking, what's the parking situation, seating preferences inside of the restaurant, dietary restrictions, the tone of the meeting matters, and so I'm often just scrambling to book what you would think is, takes 5 minutes to do, is booking a reservation, but putting that all into the chat box, and and then Zeal AI will take all of that and pull these whatever's available, right? Pull the restaurants that match the description that I gave to it, and I'm no longer bouncing between 10 tabs. And I like that if I forget something, I can just talk to it and just add on to it, just like ChatGPT, and it will update it, the response very quickly. I must say it's very, very fast. I would say also the platform is very user friendly. It's like delightful to use. It's, colorful and it's fun. It's that alone is like a nice break than, looking at specific platforms. But I think the biggest takeaway is
I'll say it. You're too polite, Sheena, but OpenTable is not that fun.
yeah.
I'll say it for you.
Yeah, being diplomatic, but OpenTable was what I was referring to.
Yeah.
And so I think the key takeaway is it saves so much time, and I'm always looking for ways to save time and be more efficient. So
Sure. Yeah. And I think too, like, I think Varsha, it was you that mentioned, like, a lot of times executive assistants are planning things across a national, geography, right? And it's one thing to know sort of instinctually what are some good go-tos in your own neck of the woods, but that's a really hard thing to scale across a lot of different states, a lot of different cities. So just being able to look like a hero, no matter where it is that you're planning, is a nice thing,
Exactly. Like, that's that feeling. We want EAs to feel confidence when they book a place, and then, be able to create those great experiences for their team. And we know that sometimes the stakes are high. And so, I think it's really important to be able to deliver on that. And so, so what we've actually tried to do is create this proprietary EA vetted database that, so if you are an EA in San Francisco, you're getting the benefit of what EAs in New York are booking for their executives. And you can feel confident that, these restaurants have been vetted for business purposes by, your counterparts, if you want to think about it that way, in another city. And so, if you have an executive who's traveling there, you can take advantage of that. And vice versa, the folks in San Francisco or Chicago or LA or DC or Boston, they know their cities well, and, they can, they are actually contributing their their favorite spots, if you want to call it that have worked well for them. And then other folks can take advantage of that. What was really interesting that I found in talking to a lot of EAs was a lot of people were keeping their own lists of places, but it's like everyone has their own list in their own pocket, and this is a way to actually share that data and have it be, leveraged by, the whole community. And I think that's really powerful.
It is. And I think that, sounds a little self-serving, so forgive me, but I think that, part of why this program has been valuable to assistants over the years is because it really is tapping into this sense of the collective knowledge and the community, and really this idea that if we crowdsource and pull together, that we can, as a collective, achieve new heights in our careers, achieve access to better proprietary cutting edge tools and resources like Zeal AI. And so I really connect very much with this idea of the community, the communal good, and, being of service for each other, and being able to do that at scale and in a more meaningful way is really exciting.
I'm really excited by, I've been very excited by how excited many of the EAs have been to contribute, to be honest.
Yeah.
They've been super excited to be a part of, this initial, data that we've brought together. And that in and of itself has been really fun to see.
Yeah. So tell us about this offer then, Varsha, for the first 500 listeners, the first 500 to log in, correct? And where should they log in to gain access to this offer? And what is this offer?
Yeah, so the offer is really, so it's at www.hellozeal.ai/Maven. So we have an exclusive page for all Maven listeners. And for the first 500 listeners, they will get access to this proprietary data source that has been vetted by EAs around the country. We're super excited for that. And then they'll also get VIP access to an EA agent that we are building. And the agent in particular is going to help with some of the most complex bookings that many EAs have to handle, which is for private rooms, large groups. These are the kind of bookings right now at restaurants that are largely they have to happen through email, through filling out forms, through phone calls often. And it's kind of like
Contracts, what is there? I mean, I know we do a lot of like contract exchange. Is that also part of what's going to be streamlined?
So in the beginning, it's going to be the selection process through the deposit, and then the contract and menu selection will still happen after the fact. But at least what we've heard from EAs is that if we could just find, what are the 10 places, the 10 private rooms that actually have availability for the date I need without having to message everybody and wait for 48 hours or however long it often takes people, that in and of itself would be helpful. And, we will have the agent will help to gather the menu and all of those items so that, before anyone has to put a deposit in, they'll know what options they have. And then they can do some of the final tweaking after the fact. The offer is to get access to an agent that will streamline probably 70% of the work. And we think even that will be hopefully really delightful and reduce a lot of frustration, save a lot of time, and yield really, interesting results and the ability to try new places also.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was, again, it was www.hellozeal.ai/Maven to take advantage of that. And it's capped at 500. So be in among the 500. Yeah, I'm excited. We actually are internally at Maven talking about a 15-year anniversary party. And I'm just thinking about a lot of what our discussions have centered around is what's going to be the right kind of appropriate space and how are we going to do this and what's the general vibe and character of what we want to curate. And so being able to avail ourselves of something like this could be really fun, right? And very,
Absolutely.
massively helpful. What about future iterations of your vision for Zeal AI? What else do you have up your sleeve?
I think for now, we really want to focus on getting dining really locked in and meeting all the use cases that, our EA audience really needs. We are looking at building loyalty points to, try help EAs benefit a little bit from, they do a lot of work. And so, loyalty points are on the roadmap. There's improvements in the profiles that we are building so that EAs can have separate profiles for all the different executives they manage. So, because each person might have a different, might have different dietary preferences and things like that. And then longer term, we've already started to get requests for, it'd be great if your agent could help us with travel and things like that. So, it's kind of, those are things that are maybe on the horizon, but probably, more like a year out or something like that.
Okay, so we'll have you back in a year and you can tell us about that at that point. Okay, so this is fun, but if Zeal AI had been around when you guys were working together, what would have been the most booked restaurant that you would have used it for, Sheena?
Pacific Catch, for sure.
Pacific Catch.
Yeah. It was always salmon or seafood that Varsha ordered. Yeah, and a salad.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
I kind of became a health nut when I joined our company. So yes, I was eating a lot of fish and seafood.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sheena.
And then I think we had a second one. It was Cadillac. Right,
Cadillac?
that was more for
Like Cadillac Bar and Grill?
yes,
Yeah.
because it was near
that's
office and
uh-huh.
fun hangout spot for team outings. Yeah.
Yeah. The only reason I know it was my mom's spot at one point.
Really?
Yeah, but that's an old school one. That's been around for a while. That's like old
Yeah.
school San Francisco,
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
nice to hear actually. Yeah, that's fun. So we mentioned the offer. How else can our EA listeners get started on the platform? Can they just go to the website and set up an account?
Yeah, just go to the website, sign in with your company email, and get started. And I
Okay.
think that's all that is really needed.
Easy enough. So I have a final question for the two of you. It's a twist, right? Because, this episode is a twist. It's a little bit of a different format for us with the EA executive partnering. So the twist on our question is, if you had to describe your partnership as a famous duo, fictional or real, right? Who would you choose to be?
I would say James Bond and Q. Double.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's cute. I like that.
I think and I like to be behind the scenes. And I think Varsha, very cool and calm under pressure, just effortlessly navigating high stake situations, always 10 steps ahead. So yeah, watching her lead was like watching Bond lead a mission. It was always very.
And then I think I need to say that I think Bond gets a lot of the spotlight, but the behind the scenes support from Q really makes every mission succeed.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's actually why I think this is a fun duo for us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very well said. And it's very true. It takes two for sure. Yeah. I wasn't really getting Thelma and Louise vibes, but I was like, that would have been a different direction altogether.
That name did
Yeah.
come to mind,
Did it?
but I don't know anything about them.
Oh, it's a great movie, Sheena. You got to watch it. It's a classic.
Yeah,
It's a
have
super
to.
classic. Yeah. Yeah. I recently rewatched it after like 20 years.
Okay.
It's still as good as it was. So, yeah. Great. Well, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much, you guys. I think I drafted the questions for this episode like 3 years ago, hoping that an executive and assistant would come along and talk to us about how they work together and what makes it work and what's kind of the crux of it all. And it's really evident that you guys have such a natural rapport and respect for one another and just a really lovely give and take. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and sharing how it is that you guys did what you do so well together. So it was great. And thank you for this incredible tips and insight and tools that I know our assistant listeners are going to be really excited to trial with Zeal AI. So really excited to be able to share that with the community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Jessica. It's been great. And yeah, I'm really excited for everybody to come and give Zeal AI a try at hellozeal.ai.
Reach is brought to you by Maven Recruiting Group, who specializes in placing executive assistants and support staff to the Bay Area's most prominent executives and companies. If you've enjoyed being part of our podcast community and are interested in becoming part of our candidate community, we're currently hiring for roles in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and Los Angeles. You can visit us at www.mavenrec.com to see some of the roles we're currently working on and to submit your resume.